Alright, today I'm going to show you how to make some corrugated pottery. This is a type of pottery that was used in the southwest, desert southwest of the United States and a bit down into Mexico. And anyways, there's some of them had designs, some of them were incredibly designed. These are a couple pieces I made a year or two ago. Sometimes I make some big ones, sometimes some small ones. This is one that I made back in, I think, about 1989. And you just start out with a coil and keep going around and around and around and around. The bigger the pot gets, the longer they take to make, because the coils stay the same size. You got some little ears on each side. They made a variety of different styles, but here's one that I made last night. It's in the drying process. It's made out of brown clay. They use white clay, gray clay, buff clay, brown clay, but a lot of them were fired to a gray color. And there's a big vertical corrugated pot, which I made last night, and you rarely ever see this style. I've only seen one really nice one, and it was one of the most amazing pots I've ever seen. Probably about 800 or 1,000 years old. Anyways, I will get started on this video. It does take a long time to make these pots, so bear with me. Okay, so the tools that we're going to be using is a gourd scraper. You can have a sponge, a scouring pad, and a pookie, or a little shallow dish, kind of rounded. If you don't have a round dish, you could probably put a cloth in it, and it just kind of helps keep the bottoms round on the pots. Some of them have flat bottoms. Well, not really flat, but kind of squatty shape. But just kind of helps. You can use it as a little turntable also. And I wanted to show one other thing. This is a corrugated pot my friend John Olson has made and used to cook in. I think he cooked biscuits and gravy or something in this thing, or dumplings, that's what it was. And he is one of the best corrugated potters there is. And this pot looks like it's 1,000 years old. Hand dug clay. Really neato. And I will be citing some of his knowledge today in this video. So first thing you do is you start out with a ball of clay, and you're going to make a little bowl. I'm going to try to keep this pot small, kind of on the small side, because it does take a long time to make these things. This is one type of pottery you got to have a lot of patience for, but it is kind of fun. It's almost like weaving baskets, coil baskets, and that's probably where this design started from, because a lot of those potters were just coming out of the basket weaving and getting more into the pottery. So you're going to start out with a bowl. You can kind of let it set up for a while if you wanted to. This is going to be your base start. And then it's all about rolling coils. If you had somebody to sit there and roll coils for you, that would help out tremendously. So this clay is a brown clay, has some temper in it, fairly fine. Some of the old pots were made out of really coarse, dirty, sandy clay. Some of them were made out of really fine clay. And you could either roll them out on a table or roll them out by hand. I guess if you had one of them presses to just press out your coils, that would be pretty good too. So you get a few coils made up, about the right size. And you can make these things really small. I think it's best to make really small ones right when you're starting out. That way it looks real clean. Can't make too many of them at once because they start to dry a little bit and then they don't attach to each other very well. I'm going to use this coil as my start coil. I'm going to start out with a real fine taper at one end, let's see, I'm a right-handed person, but I pinch with my left, so I'll just start right on the center of this bowl and just start welding it on there. Hopefully I'm getting this in the frame. So you want to really make sure it's smeared on there. My friend John was telling me that to make them right, each coil should be overlapped with another coil about 3 times if you want them to really be sealed right. But we can get away with 1.5 overlap. A lot of the old pots, when they break, they don't break on these coils. They kind of break all different angles, so you could tell that those pots were really well made when if you drop it and it doesn't break along these lines. Because each one of these is an unsealed coil basically, but when you smear them together, they're getting enough overlap to become really well made. Now if you want to, you can follow in the other thumb pattern, or you can stagger the pattern, and each one will produce a little bit different design. My buddy John, when he gets to making these things, his thumb and everything just really, it just looks perfect the way he makes them. He's an amazing potter. I've seen some of the old pieces where they have a sunburst pattern right at the bottom. Some of them are just plain old corrugated pots. And see, there's no coil on the inside. If you're doing it right, you won't see the seam line in the inside, but you can kind of maneuver the thickness and get the shape right. Like I say, I'm going to keep this kind of on the small side, but that's our start. There's 100 different ways to make corrugated pottery, probably. There's a book on corrugated pots on the old ones, and lots of pictures of old corrugated pots. Some of them just big, big pots. I think the biggest ones I've made are sitting in the Springs Preserve Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's an interactive museum. If you get over that way, definitely check it out. As you can see, I'm kind of splitting the difference on this coil. So I'm pushing down and then rocking it up, and then I go back just a tiny bit just to make sure that that coil doesn't lift. The wetter your clay, the better. I guess this clay is a little on the dry side, and that's just how I like my clay. But if you want more movement, then you got to use a little bit wetter clay. That way you can get those nice smears. All right, when you start off, or where you left off is right here. That's the last coil. You want to make sure you kind of blend those together so you can't see where the coil ended and began. So that's all there is really to corrugated pottery. It's just a whole lot of pinching. And you gotta ask yourself, why did they just prefer the design. You can make 20 or 30 pots and then sometimes in about the time it takes to make one of these. So they were doing it for a reason, and a lot of times they would store their beans and corn in these things. They would soak beans and corn. They would cook in them, and everybody thinks that maybe they were used for, maybe the ripples gave more surface to heat the boiled water faster at higher altitudes using less fuel, which makes perfect sense to me. There's been some studies done with using gas fires, and they say it didn't work, but you know, I still think that there's a possible chance that it does work. I don't know. I'm not an expert on it. But they were doing it for a reason. Who knows? Maybe it took the gas out the beans, Anasazi beans. Sometimes they would just lay these coils on real flat and do a little design in the mix. Now I could be pressing these coils up a little bit more and giving a little more attachment as we go up to the transition zone here, where we're going to start. Right now it's just heading outward, but pretty soon I'm going to start going upward and inward with the pot. So you got to slowly make this transition upward. See, I got a little bit of a seam there, but I'll just make sure I wipe that real smooth. I'm going to change the shape just a little bit. If you press too hard inward, you're going to start spreading the coils on the outside or mashing them. You don't want that, but the gourd scraper really helps out. And I have a little, looks like a little tiny bowl at the bottom here. I'm going to just put a little ball of clay in there, add just a touch of water. Sometimes if you don't use the little bowl that I started with, you will get a little crack crossing through here, so you gotta really pay attention to that area. And if you're gonna be cooking it, you don't want a crack right at the bottom of your pot. So alright, miraculously a couple more pots have appeared. Little mug and a white corrugated. Alright, so I've gotten this far along on the pot, and let me bring, I'm gonna have to change the angle here. So this is where I'm going to be working from. I want to get the best shot for you, but this is our transition zone, so we're going to start going up and inward now. So I'll start where I left off. So I push it in, up, and then I go back a little bit. That way, each time it kind of Make sure it's sealed on there. This clay has a lot of high tensile strength, and it's really plastic. Dig it myself. And it's pretty darn durable. So this beats holding it in your hand or in your lap. A lot of times they probably just made them in their lap. They might have used a little bowl like this when they got so far along. It really helps out a lot. And for rolling coils, some folks probably roll them just in their hands. And, where do they get the piece of plywood? Okay. They most likely were using a nice thin piece of sandstone slab that in the Southwest are super common. They're everywhere. They traded for that stuff or collected it themselves back in the day. You'll see a lot of this style potteries around Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. It was all over the Southwest, and I think I'd heard that it was only made in the desert Southwest, but I did see a video on some Amazonian folks down south, way down there in the jungle, and they made these really fancy pots, and a couple of the bowls that I saw were corrugated on the outside, which they had no contact with the desert Southwest, but so what I guess I'm trying to say is there was two places in the world, but on the same continent, where they made corrugated pottery. But for the most part, the desert Southwest is where it was happening. If you're making a lot of this pottery, I mean, they made tons of it out and around these ruins. You see just shards everywhere. Sometimes they're a foot thick. They must have had some time on their hands to sit here and do this every day. Or I guess if you got some good corn harvests and there was nothing else to do but make pottery and hang out, that would be pretty cool. I don't know how much of it in the wintertime they did. Clay isn't much fun when it's freezing out. Every once in a while I'll just come by and just kind of give it a really light pinch, and then I can see this transition here, get that kind of scraped up a little bit. Real lightly, I'm not pushing very hard, just enough to drag the surface over those little tiny creases. They're just showing a little bit. A lot of people really will do too hard, but you can use your thumb also. Just real lightly. Always back it up with your finger. Your thumb just kind of smears the surface. Alright, so nearing completion here. I'm going to add the rim coil on. I'm going to split the difference. Make sure it's attached real well. Smooth out the inside coil right away so it doesn't dry out. And I'm going to just kind of get this lip to flare a little bit. Kind of bring it up a little and then I'll pull it out. Any of these little cracks you see, want to get on them before they get too crazy. Now when you're going outward, you want to make sure you put slack back in the lip there. Otherwise it'll get chapped. So I'm going to press down on it and then I'm going to come back and go around and pull it out. And each time you pull it out, you have to put a little slack back in there. So I'm going to go out all the way around. And it's getting pretty close, but I'll put a little more slack back in here. And then I'll pull it down a little more. A lot of the corrugated pots had really nice flared lips. I guess so when they're stirring their food, they can keep the stuff inside the pot. Just go around. A lot of little tiny pinches. You don't want to do a whole bunch of really big pinches. And real slow turn. Okay, so getting pretty good there. I like to use a hacksaw blade, one of my favorite tools. And I'll just kind of straighten out this lip a little bit. Looked a little uneven. Then I'll come back with the damp scouring pad. Get these at the hardware store. They're actually an abrasive sandpaper pad. I cut them down to size. They work pretty good. You could use juniper bark or rabbit skin, whatever. So now I'm going to put the little ears on it. Get a real thin coil, put some water on there. Make sure it's real soft. I've got so much grip on my hands here. Just rolling a coil out on the board here real fast. So on these coils, you want to make them really skinny. And they didn't decorate all their pots with them like this, but they're kind of fun to do. Let's see, make sure I'm in. So I'm going to go about like that, and then from the other end, I'll roll go it the opposite way. Hey, maybe I'll make a S for Soares. So on the back side, make sure you scratch it real good, and you don't want to leave a cup or a little place where a bubble can form, so make sure you get all the convexity out of that. You can even use some slimy clay water. And let's see, I'll put it about right here. So I'm going to obliterate the coils just enough to make sure that there's no area a bubble can be in there. And I'm going to roll it from one side up. If you press too hard, you'll get rid of the design. So then I'll go around to the other side and do the same thing. And if you want to make sure you're on the exact same or the exact opposite side, you can put a little mark on the lip just to know exactly where you want to make your placement for the coil. So I'll scratch that out. And this clay is real sticky. It's not like commercial clay. Commercial clay is, I don't know what they put in it, but it can make it a little tricky for corrugated pottery, although I see some people make some incredible things out of commercial clay. Just not me. Alright. Scratch that out. Water bill's kind of far away. Erase that little line, clean it up a bit, and that's your corrugated pot with the little design on there. Came out okay. Hopefully it'll fire out pretty good. And if you can, please share the video, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'm Tony Soares.